years ago, the ladies didn't go to church. They didn't go anywhere unless they wore hats and gloves. And years ago, I taught millinery. A friend of mine that had a turkey farm, she wore hats everywhere. And she said, "Jean, if you'd set up a millinery shop, I'll give you all my hats." And I had 96 hats come from her. And most of those hat boxes up on the shelves had her hats in because she bought very expensive hats. And so I thought, well, I've got stuff in the attic, I've got hats. So that's the reason this was set up, was to show off her hats and how to make hats. So a lot of these things on the table are materials that we use to make hats. And then on the shelves are hats that she had and some I had. So this is our millinery shop. And I usually sit back in here somewhere during the fair, and people will say, well, how did you make this hat? How did you make the feather hats down in here? A lot of those feathers on those hats came from her turkey farm. We would hand pick the turkeys and wash them and dye them and dry them in a dryer, electric dryer. And so then in teaching millinery, I would get feathers from her and teach people how to make a feather hat, for one. And so that's why this was set up, because I had the materials and it was something different. But as I said before, everyone wore a hat. They didn't go anywhere, the ladies, if they got dressed up, unless they had a hat on. So I think it's kind of coming back now, because you'll see pictures in the newspaper or magazines of some big affair, and the ladies will have these hats on. It depended on the time of year. Spring, summer, they were straw hats. Wintertime, they were felt and feather hats. And, but ladies always wore hats. You had to be gloves and hat to be properly dressed, yes. Shorts, slacks were out of the question. In fact, a lot of places they are yet. You just don't go unless you wear a dress and a hat and gloves. And the ladies always carried a purse. Whether they had any money in it or not, they always carried purses. And there was times when people would have suits made, and then the same material, they would make a hat. There are hats up here, felt hats, hats made with wool, the same as a coat or a dress or suit. So we look dowdier now to go some places compared to what they wore years ago. And they didn't have a lot of dresses, because a lot of the women, you couldn't go to the store years ago and buy a dress or a suit. You had to have it made. There would be ladies that would go around to farms and take a little sewing machine, a pedal sewing machine, and make clothes for the women. And I have some old dresses that were made for Charles's aunts and grandmothers and so forth. And they usually had one or two good dresses that they would wear to fancy parties or church or whatever. It was a different time, and this museum, we're trying to show some of those things that people wouldn't see now if they went to town. We have a picture back there that was taken at the old Summit County Fairgrounds in Akron, and it was a farmer's picnic, a yearly picnic. And if you look at that picture, just about every woman has a hat on, and the men have suits on. I want to give credit to the lady that gave me all the hats, and that was Virginia Ritchie, who had the Ritchie Turkey Farm in Stowe on Route 91. And you will see one of the, in fact, I think it's the first feed wagon that was made that they used, because she raised as high as 10,000 turkeys a year that were all sold at Thanksgiving or Christmas. And most of the turkeys, they dressed, fresh dressed, right there on the farm. But be nice to give her a little credit for donating all the hats.